Okay, let's start together, everyone. So officially, happy Saturday, whatever that means, because in this way we can come together all over the world in different time zones. So I don't want to be timist in saying good morning, and that it's morning here, but maybe it's not for you. So it's nice to see fresh faces and also some that I've spent some time with as well. But equally welcome to everyone. Namaste. So we have been doing more of these webinars together because I find that it's providing an environment for a very focused topic and also a way for us to come together in a held space, in a contained space. But also I welcome those who are going to watch these afterwards as the recordings, and I hope they're of service. And so our topic today, I hope, is one that you're here because it's of interest to you. And I feel like it's a topic that should be of interest to all of us because it's something that we may want to implement at the what we call the Ritu Sandhis, at the junctions of the seasons every year in one way or another. And especially these two seasons of the springtime and the fall time, accordingly, as we consider them in Ayurveda. So how we apply that and how we work with that is very specific to each one of us as the years pass and this body changes and this mind also shifts. But having the knowledge of this, I hope, will be able to be carried forward into this time now and also into our coming years and seasons, rather than us today having a prescriptive idea of what should or shouldn't be done. Rather than, and I see this more and more when I was thinking about it just before we were hopping on, I see more and more these prescriptive ideas for everything, not just cleansing and fasting, but sort of a one size fits all or a one suit for all. And then whether it's a book or it's a Dr. Google ad that we end up checking out that gives us the steps and the rules, and something about the linear rational mind seems to love this, right? But Ayurveda lives in a totally different consciousness. I have to say it in that way, really, to be very honest. And what it requires of us is to be really deeply in touch with the present moment and with the presence of this embodiment and the presence of the needs of any given moment. And there's something beautiful about just the unraveling of the tendency to want to live by the mind, and that Ayurveda gives us the gift of living more by the heart full way, if we can say it in that way, living more in the presence of that. And so I'll often say that Ayurveda is a presence-based medicine, rather than a preventative medicine or a curative medicine, although it provides and offers those beautifully. It really is a medicine that invites us into deep presence, because even as the etymology of the word means, many of you know this, Ayurveda, it means to know life, to truly know life, to know what it is to be alive in this given moment, in this very breath now. So similarly today, when we talk about Ayurvedic cleansing, if that's the intent of our webinar, it shouldn't be something prescriptive, but rather something that brings us into deep contact with what is life asking to be cleansed or to be released, or on some level to be purified at this time in my life, in this life force, in this specific embodiment now, in this specific mind now, in the whole structure that's occurring now, in consideration also of the greater field that I am in contact with and in connection with. And I mean that both geographically, the place that we live, but also the collective field as far as consciousness, like what's going on in our state of mind as a human population, or our family around us, or our culture around us. All of these things are part of the gift of Ayurveda's invitation to really, really allow us to come into contact with what is being given and what is known now in the nowness of our lives. And so the cleansing similarly arises from that. So that's what we're going to discuss, really being able to come into contact with that more and more. And I'm aware that in the webinars, we have this hour together, and there might be some presupposition on my behalf that you have some background or something in Ayurveda. If you don't worry. We have lots of different, I will try as much as I can to share these things in a way that's really down to earth, as Ayurveda is, right down into the roots of the earth for all of us. But we also have various information on the RASA Ayurveda website, and I also offer the 50-hour Ayurveda immersion if you're wanting a more immersive experience as well. So that's available there. But there's also introductory information on the website that can help you to orient right from the ground up as well. So let's dive into it. But before we do, what I would love for us to do is just to sit for a moment. So let's just take a moment to close the eyes and to find comfort in our seatedness, and to simply enjoy a moment of this medicinal contact. That medicine is actually this contact with the naturalness of being. So even now, what does that mean for us to be in connection with, in contact with this moment, the sensations of this physicality, the full spectrum aliveness that may be occurring in our sphere. So maybe sounds and smells and various things that are here. They're not contrary to life now. They're part of the totality. The naturalness of our breath now, feeling this very breath. Feeling the way in which breath is always occurring, its ever presence. Feeling the naturalness also of even the inner field of the emotions and the mind. It has its own field, its own dance. Whatever's here is here. Part of this total invitation and intimacy with life now. Ayurveda, to know life now. To be in accordance rather than opposition with life now. And similarly, even taking a moment to feel this springtime energy for most of us. Maybe some of us on the call are contrarily moving into autumn. Maybe you're in a different place in the world, but feeling this way that we've entered a new seasonal tide. Feeling the energy of the season as it lives within us now. The energy of the day. And feeling our own intent, our own sankalpa, the reason that we end up seated here. Whether we're here live or we're watching this recording, what brings us into contact with this now? Hearing the sankalpa, the heartful intention. Now. And then just allow yourself to sit and reside as I chant a mantra to really the depths and the lineage of Ayurveda, and really call forth the knowingness of this lineage and of Dhanvantari, the great healer that lives within our very own hearts. May this one be here fully and guide our way this morning. So just allow this to wash through you. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Dhanvantaraye Amrita Kalashtaya Sarva Maya Vinashaya Trailokya Nadaya Om Namo Bhagavate Namaha. May this truly be an expansive space in which the lineage and the wisdom of all the great rishis, all the great Vaidyas, all the great doctors and the wisdom holders live here within and between us and in this space to guide our way, so that this will truly be of service to our sankalpa, of service to our intent. Let's enjoy a nice full breath there, and then come to open the eyes and find your own comfiness, find your own comfort. And I would even welcome you, if you have a piece of paper or anything there, just to write your sankalpa down for a second. Take a moment. What's your intent? Why are you here? And maybe it was surprising for you, or put it on your computer somewhere. Maybe it was surprising for you to hear this, what your intent is in being here. Maybe it wasn't surprising at all, but so. And a sankalpa is really not an expectation. So it's not like this is what I have to get to be content. It's really just what lives here and what might the echoes bear forth. So who knows? Maybe it'll come in this space, and maybe just by acknowledging that, it will also come later today, or 20 years from now. Who knows? So we leave it at the altar of life. So where I would love to start, I suppose, and I don't really have great plans. This is part of Ayurveda, is just for us to be together in this way and see what arises dependent upon the configuration of all of your sankalpas and why we come together. But where I feel compelled to start is for us to consider the why behind cleansing, why it is that we might have been called here, and the why behind this yearning to cleanse, what it is that wants to be cleansed, or even this word that we use, cleansing, in English, and how Ayurveda sees this as well. Today, I see that there are a lot of fads around cleansing, detoxing, dieting. What else do we use? What other kinds of terms do we use? And by the way, you can put things in the chat. So if at any point you want to ask a question in the chat, or if something's there for you, please feel free to do that as well. Okay, know that that's there. We can be discursive. But so all these different words that we see for cleansing, and I myself, before Ayurveda really found its way integrated, I have probably done, I don't know, at least 100 different cleansings and fasts and so many different things, from the master cleanse to the macrobiotic diet number 7. I was saying it in the class the other day, in the immersion the other day. I probably did that diet 15 times, 10 days on just brown rice, and macrobiotic, or the master cleanse. This one was popularized, I think, by Beyonce. There's all these different cleanses that are out there. Currently, this celery juice diet, right, is quite big, and it's taken its own fad. And even in university, because I was already interested in the intersection between food and consciousness, I was vegetarian already, but I was compelled to try the Atkins diet. Does anyone remember the Atkins diet? Oh my goodness, I was an angry person for about a month while we did this experiment, an anthropological self-experiment on what it looks like to eat a whole host of flesh, actually. So that was an interesting one. So I myself, I'm not saying this from an outsider's perspective. I myself have played and danced in that realm. And Ayurveda has offered so much wisdom when it comes to the understanding of cleansing. Because what it offers is the following, not just with cleansing, but with everything. And it goes back to what I said right from the beginning. With all of the chikitsa, as we call it, with all of the treatments, if we can use that word in English, or all of the applications of Ayurveda, they are always considerate of the person, not the problem. Let's say it in that way. The person, not the problem. So they don't immediately move towards the symptomological challenge and try in some way to just treat the symptom, to some way repress or suppress the symptom. So treating the dis-ease rather than actually treating and enhancing the ease, which is the being itself. So Ayurveda says, no, let us come back to the being, the very being whose natural way is to be of ease. We're all born just like the birds and the bees and the trees and everything else that we see in Prakriti, in nature. We're born to be of our own ease, to be of our own great swasta, to be of our own great health. And so in that same way, Ayurveda stays in alignment with this intention and says, we won't treat symptoms, but instead we'll look to the person in which, the field in which these things are occurring. And when we look to the field in which these things are occurring, the medicine becomes wholly individualized. It becomes not only individualized, but it also becomes of the moment, if I can say it in that way. Because even ourselves, we know, maybe we've had a skin rash at one point in our life. So, I used to get skin rashes when I was younger. And then we have a skin rash 20 years later. Is it happening in the same field? It's happening in the same individual, but it may be happening for wholly different reasons, right? It may be happening for very, very different reasons. Within that individual, there's certain propensities, but our lives and the way in which we engage, the things we eat, our lifestyle, all of it may have changed. So Ayurveda is always looking to treat the wholeness, that is the individual, the person, to restore our naturalness as health, rather than to treat these symptoms. And in that way, what that truly does is it gets to the root rather than repressing and pushing aside a whole host of symptoms or chasing symptoms, if I can say it in that way. I often say that, chasing one symptom and then another and then another, and really never getting to the baseline culprit of things. So in the same way, cleansing is very much applied, and traditional cleansing, as it is outlined in Ayurveda, is wholly applied in consideration of the individual in their current present-based circumstances, which mean, what are our present-based circumstances? It means the place we live, the things that we're engaging with in our lives, the season that is occurring, what has led up to this moment, where we're going also. So, what we might be, the future might be holding for us. All of those things are considered. And in Ayurvedic languaging, we can say we consider the prakruti, the constitution of the individual, the doshic makeup. And we also consider the vikruti. We consider what's their current imbalance. And so determining for ourselves, and a lot of us are here for that, right? Like, okay, how do I just cleanse some of this gunk out of my system? Tiffany, I'm feeling heavy. I'm feeling a bit dense, whether that's in adipose tissue or in the mind. I'm feeling a bit of lethargy. Just give me some, ideas of the best herbs to take and the diet to eat. Isn't that what we're going to do? Absolutely. But at the same time, we have to consider that it's wholly individualized for each and every one of us. And there's so much wisdom to this. I think even starting here, how many of us, I already see many of you going like this. It makes sense, right? What we might apply for our sister or our brother, or what we might apply for our mom or our children, could never be the same for ourselves. Even think of what I just said now, our children or our parents. We inherently know that the intensity and the invasiveness of cleansing is even age dependent. This is a part of Ayurveda. Of course, for elderly people, we can't be doing a hard and fast regimen of extensive cleansing, right? That would involve certain purgations and strong cleansing. And similarly for children, can you imagine doing with your 7 or 8-year-old some kind of strong cleansing? Eat your khichdi for 12 days, little Johnny. It's just not going to happen, right? Also, it's not going to happen. So in that way, we know these things already. But Ayurveda highlights what we already know. It highlights what we already know, and it brings us into remembrance of what we already know. It's not really teaching new concepts to take up by the mind, but to remember what's already here in our inherent wisdom. So when it comes to cleansing, it's the same thing. And so in Ayurveda, when you hear this kind of prescriptive, one-size-fits-all idea of cleansing, and because Ayurveda has become more popularized, this is happening, like in yoga as well. It is happening. So even though, for example, at RASA Ayurveda, we offer khichdi cleanse kits. And also Lisa is offering more and more of these kind cleanses, which involve khichdi. Khichdi is not the only Ayurvedic cleansing. It's one way that we can do this. And it seems to apply some of this recognition and wisdom of Ayurveda in a way that's very easily applicable for those of us in the West, if I can say it in that way. But Ayurvedic cleansing doesn't equal a khichdi diet, just so everybody's very clear on that from the beginning, okay? But it can involve that as well. So even the way in which it's become prescriptive in Ayurveda, this is already anti-Ayurvedic because it's not honing in to the presence of what is needed in any given moment. So traditionally in Ayurveda, the way in which cleansing is considered is in looking at the individual, we need to firstly even consider whether they need cleansing. This is really important because I think we all assume, we have this presupposition that we all need to cleanse, right? Oh God, I'm detoxing and retoxing and I must need to cleanse our air and our water and all this toxicity and the stress. And on some level, that's true. But on another level, if we're in a depleted state and we cleanse in a depleted state, what's going to happen? What happens if you try to scrape away from something that already doesn't have any nourishment? We get further depleted. So in Ayurveda, we would say we consider whether or not someone has a vata depleted kind of situation. And in that situation, we need to do something that's actually what we call more brahmana, more nourishing, more building, actually. Can a cleanse be building? Well, we wouldn't really use that term. So in Ayurveda, when we talk about cleansing, we're actually talking about two contrasting ways or approaches to treat and restore balance in the system. And one is called, as I just mentioned to you now, brahmana, which brahmana means to give nourishment or to build up. And then there's langana, and langana means to reduce or to purify. So to build or to reduce. I'm giving you the Sanskrit words, but just the concept is what you need to understand. So to build or to reduce. And then even within this reduction therapy, if we do need to reduce, how strongly do we need to reduce? That's another consideration. So, for example, when I talked about our children or our elders right now, how strong does that reduction need to be? And classically, there's a lot of considerations. Our age is one, the time of year is another, what's going on in our Prakriti and our Vikruti. So again, as I just said now, maybe we do have what's called some ama, we have some waste, some toxicity in body and mind, but we have mostly a Vata Vikruti. We have, more of a light, kind of dry system, maybe a bit more depleted. We don't need to do a strong and hard cleansing regime. Maybe a little bit, but mostly nourishing the body. Is that making sense, even from a very commonsensical perspective? So in that way, Langana, this reduction therapy, or to reduce, comes a twofold, if I can say it in that way. So we have nourishment, and then we also have reducing or cleansing, right? What we're talking about today. And in that cleansing, the thing that's probably the most infamous about Ayurveda, besides, khichdi that you've heard of, is Panchakarma. And how many of us have heard of Panchakarma before? So Pancha means 5, and karma means actions. And this is the most well-known Ayurvedic cleansing or detox program, right? And so many of us have heard, like, where can I do this? Or do I have to go to India? That's a question I often get asked, right? And Saskia is saying she did it for 28 days, right? And it was life-changing. I often say, like, if there's 2 things you want to do in your life, it's up to you, but this is my suggestion. One is to sit a 10-day silent retreat, and the second is to do at least a month-long Panchakarma, or let's just say a month-long Ayurvedic treatment, where you go to an Ayurvedic center, because they may choose, and this is what I want to talk about now, they may choose not to give you Panchakarma. Because Panchakarma is the more invasive Langana. It's the more invasive cleansing. Invasive is a bit of a hard word, but let's say it's the more involved reduction therapy, because it uses 5 actions to really strongly clear out ama from the system. And it needs to be done if the system both has more ama to be cleansed and also has enough bala, has enough strength and enough ojas, enough vitality to do so. And there's enough time also to do so. So to be very, very honest, even this term has been on some level capitalized. You go to a center, whether it's in Bali or Thailand, and they say that I'm doing a Panchakarma for 1 week. It's not a Panchakarma. Or it's illy applied in that, you're doing all these Panchakarma techniques, you're doing these 5 actions of cleansing very quickly, and then there's a whiplash in the system, actually, right? It's too strong and fast and quick. Traditionally, a Panchakarma is usually at least about a month and a half, about 50 days. Actually, some of you are like, what? Say what? Like one of my godsons says to me, say what, Tiffany? So about a month and a half. But I can really assure you, I've had 3 opportunities to do this thus far in this life, the longer ones, and just witnessing the way in which, and actually I have to say, witnessing the people who are around me is more than enough miraculous seeing of swasta, of health coming to the surface, to give you a lot of belief in this process, in this Panchakarma process. So in cleansing, we have what is called these 2 different types, Shodhana, which is involving Panchakarma. And Shodhana really means purification. It's purification therapy, and that's Panchakarma. And then we have what we're really here to talk about, which is Shamana. So we have Shodhana and we have Shamana. They're both cleansing, but Shamana, really what it means is to bring everything to neutrality. We don't need excessive cleansing, or maybe we just don't have the time and the preparation and the place for it currently. Is that making sense also? It's like, I can't do a Panchakarma at home, or you give yourself 5, I'm not saying me, but like a lot of us might think that. I can't do 5 purgations and I don't even know how to do that. And then I'm willy-nilly following something off of, ayur.net or whatever there might be, right? This is not a properly applied Ayurvedic protocol. So in that way, Shamana is really the name of the game for most of us, which means how do I do kind of a light, it's often translated as palliative. How do I do a light palliative, gentle, neutralizing? And especially if we bring this cleansing in this lighter way to these Ritu Sandhis, to the time where we transition from late winter to spring, and where we transition also from late summer to fall, we're going to find that all we really need is Shamana. We don't need this strong shodhana. We won't need as much these strong, heavy purifications. And especially if we live the spaces in between in a little more balance, we'll also find that just twice a year, we need some gentle cleansing and neutralizing, if I can call it in that way. So in that way, this is still applied dependent upon each one of us, what our needs are. But traditionally, with Shamana, there were a few things that were followed. Okay, so what is Shamana really? And the name of the game in Shamana is really looking at how do we rekindle the Agni and remove or digest the Ama. And Agni means the fire or the digestive fire, the process of natural clearing, because this Agni, this fire, is not just in our guts, but throughout our whole body. So our process to properly, or let's say the proper processing of inputs. So is our Agni really well balanced in our minds? Like the inputs that are coming every day, or have we got bogged down there? Okay, this is another thing with cleansing. A lot of us think it's just about what we eat, right? But Ayurveda says, as far as the Agni, we're going to restore the Agni in body, in energy, in emotionality, and also in mind. How do we rekindle the Agni so that the fire, so that things can be properly processed, transformed, metabolized, digested? Right? So the digestion, not only physiologically, but also mentally, emotionally, is happening the way in which it needs to happen. And secondarily, and this is what we call in Ayurveda, Pachana. So the second one, the first one we call Agni Dipana, and the second one we call Ama Pachana, which means how do I also rid the body of Ama? How do I digest and release Ama? And Ama means waste in the body. So waste, buildup of toxicity. So firstly, I'm kindling. Okay, so Dipana means to kindle, to rekindle. So I'm kindling the Agni. I'm waking up the fire. I'm giving some kindling, literally, to my internal fires and I would say of all three brains, right? Of my gut, my heart, and my mind. And then how am I also helping with this Pachana to remove Ama, to help to gently slide this Ama out? And this Ama, this toxicity, you answer this question for yourself. Does toxicity only exist in our eliminatory system? Absolutely not. Does it only also release itself through our digestive and elimination system? No, of course it does as well, right? So we're pooping out the unnecessary stuff. And that's what we want to do when we do also Amapachana. We want to work with certain diets and herbs and etc. that will help with that. But what about the Ama that lives in different parts of our system? Just like we need to kindle the Agni, Agni and Ama have a relationship constantly. So if Agni isn't balanced, then Ama often starts to what? Increase in our system, toxicity. So what if our digestive capacity of our minds is burnt out or bogged down? What happens? Do we not also get mental Ama? Do we not also get mental toxicity, emotional toxicity, energetic toxicity? So we're kindling this Agni, and then we're also helping in various ways through our cleanse to move out Ama. And right from these beginning understandings that this should be individually applied and that this is one of the first things we do in Shamana, all of us should already be thinking, well, what do I need for me then? What are the ways that I can kindle Agni for me? And what are the ways I can remove Ama for me? And this is really where your cleanse takes off from, because each one of us will be different, right? Some of us are doing wonderful things to balance our digestive fire, both in our minds and also in our bodies, in our guts. And some of us, we're not eating, the best things, or some of us are eating great things, but we're watching and listening and engaging with a lot of stressful things in our minds. And some of us have got that really, quite well. The input that we give to our minds is fairly balanced, but our guts, maybe not as much, right? So each one of us is individual in that, in the way in which we need to examine the relationship, the balance that we have between that Agni and that Ama. And I'm just seeing in the chat, I feel we cleanse our heart every month with the lunar cycles when we hold this space. Yeah, it's also very beautiful. As women, there's definitely a natural cleansing that's happening when we're menstruating and clearing, and even into menopause in our relationship with the moon. And actually, in May, I have a 10-hour course that's Ayurveda and Tantra For women. It's over 5 weeks. And some of you have done that before, actually. I see some sweet faces where we've been in intimate space together in that way, which I love. So this Shamana, what else does it involve, this cleansing? So we have that relationship between Agni and Ama. What else do we do? Fasting. So usually there's some type of fast with this cleansing. But when we hear fast, what do we think? Right? So a lot of us think fasting means I just drink water, right? Or do I even get to drink water? Because there's this whole fad around black fasting now and breatharianism and, you shouldn't drink anything. Is that a thing? Or maybe this is the first time some of you are hearing this and going again, say what? Right? So there is black fasting also. But what does fasting mean? There is a word in Ayurveda, which is the word ahara. And ahara does mean diet or food, but what it really means is inputs. So what are we doing in our fasting, in our cleanse? We're conscientious of what we're going to take some space from, what we're going to fast from, as far as all of the inputs. And how do we input? We input through this sense organ, but we have 4 other sense organs, do we not? So we input through all 5 sense organs. And this is essential to cleansing. Another thing that's often missing in the Western kind of very quickly applied. It's like we want fast food, fast medicine, fast sex, and fast cleansing, right? Or fast fasting. And so in that same way, we often just apply it as, okay, how do I just come to a really restrictive diet, do it for 7 days, and then, go back and, fit in the wedding dress and drink and eat and everybody's merry, right? But actually from an Ayurvedic perspective, this is really damaging. So we want to be considerate of ahara in all of its forms, all the inputs that are happening. How are we ingesting? What are we ingesting and welcoming into our system? And what can be fasted on all levels? So in a minute, I'll talk about what we can do in all of these, like, for example, what we can do to kindle Agni, what we can do to remove the waste, what we can do to fast as well. But it already gives you all an idea. Some of you, maybe like myself, for quite some years, I've eaten a plant-based diet, what we might call a vegan diet. So this is already more aligned to an ongoing fasting diet. Some of us may not eat that diet. So we may say, okay, I need to move a little bit closer towards that diet for example, 2 weeks. 2 weeks is often the time we prescribe in Ayurveda, but especially around the Sandhi. The Sandhi means the junction between the seasons. We are past the junction now. We've moved into springtime or we've moved into fall time, but it's still a good time. It's the beginning of that time. And that's why we're having this time now to discuss this as well. So usually the 2 weeks, kind of the week before the transition to the season and the week after is a great time for this cleansing to happen. So the fasting will need to be considerate of our dosha, of our individuality, of what we've been inputting. It's like I said before in our lives, maybe, previously in our life, we were drinking and we were having, more consumption of intoxicants or whatever it might be. And maybe now we're not as much. So we don't have to worry about fasting from that. Or maybe it's cycled around in our life, right? We're all in different places. So when we consider this part of it, what we call rata, what is this fasting period, then we have to consider for now. What needs to be fasted from for now? So we have fasting. We also have this dipana and the pachana. And then what else is considered? And these are interesting ones in Shamana that we don't often think of. But what are other ways we can contribute to our cleanse? Another way is actually through what we call vyayama. And vyayama means exercise. Because what's happening with exercise? We're kindling Agni. It's a natural dipana pachana. We're waking up Agni in the whole body, cellular Agni. We're getting the whole body warmed up, which basically means we're liquefying also the Ama. We're like all that sludgy stuff that's held in the cells and, is held various places in the body, but also in the mind. What happens to the mind when we exercise? We all know it, right? So taking some time for exercise also is part of our cleanse. Now, do we do excessive exercise? Do we start doing, 3 hours of HIIT daily during our cleanse? No, it's Shamana. So it's this palliative care of ourselves. We're taking care. It's deep self-care, right? In this way. So again, it's individually considered though. If we have a more kapha constitution, are we going to exercise a bit more in the spring because it's kapha time? The spring season is more of the kapha season. Yes, we are. And my kapha people, my kapha rogis are always like, I hate you, Tiffany, in the springtime, because I'm like, we're kicking up, the exercise regime. We've got to get you back on an exercise regime. And then after a couple of weeks, they say, I love you again. So that's always, brings hope. Because during the spring season, what are the qualities? What are the gunas we have during the spring season? And again, this is the consideration, cleansing when and for who. So during the spring season, we have the qualities, the gunas of what? These qualities of wetness, so dampness and moisture, right? Heaviness, everything has been dense. I don't know about you, but here it's mucky and muddy and sludgy, and I have to wear really tall rain boots right now because everything's really mucky, right? So what other qualities? It's slimy. There's a quality we call slimy. Everything's kind of soft also, right? The earth is soft. These are not a mistake. These are beautiful qualities of this season that contribute to what? Growth, fertility. Everything's getting ready to regrow. So similarly in our systems have cocooned and held on and hibernated. But what's happened then? The body might be feeling what? Dense and sludgy and a bit slimy and soft and squishy, and right? All of that might be there. Mucousy, feeling a bit more padded than usual. We can feel all of those things that are here. It's not a mistake. The spring season is about that. The late winter season has been about that. But if those things, and we did another webinar, the last webinar was more about the imbalances that can come during the spring season. So watch that one if you want more info on that. But if we feel in the spring like it's become over congested, the body, the mind, the literal respiratory system, then this shows that we have some things probably to cleanse, right? The spring qualities have gotten overly dense, heavied, and congesting in our system. So during the springtime, our exercise helps to decongest. Our Dipana Pachana helps to decongest. Our fasting should be about bringing opposite qualities to those qualities. You see, in the fall, we have different qualities, do we not? Late summer to fall is very different, and we'll have another webinar then. But it's very, very different. Are we going to want to bring hot spices during that time? No. But during this time, our heated spices, like using a little bit of our cayenne and using things like cinnamon as well as turmeric and ginger, these are wonderful because what will they do? They'll wake up and stir up the Agni, and they'll start to liquefy some of the sludginess, right? It's like, putting a hairdryer on the mud. What does it start to do, right? So it starts to get these things moving, bonfiring it all. But in late summer, moving towards autumn, or in that autumn season, no, we have a lot of heat in the system. So we want to fast and apply these things differently. So our Viraichana, our exercise, is also part of Shamana. It's also part of this cleansing. And how we apply that exercise may be different for each and every one of us. But what I can say is part of the gift of this exercise, that is part of the fasting and part of the Dipana Pachana. One of the easiest ways to combine all four is to spend more time in nature. So exercising in nature does what? It changes the input. So we're fasting, we're not on our phones, we're not, we're fasting what we're watching, what we're listening to, etc. It brings us more into connection with the naturalness of the rhythms of nature. We find that all five senses are impacted by being in nature, impacted. We find that our Agni is stimulated in a proper way. That naturally the purification of nature helps Amma to move out of the system, helps, and this is why we know, even there's books now on forest bathing and mental health benefits. It's literally purifying Amma from the mind, right? So it helps in that way. But just walking alone, the exercise of that is also benefiting, or whatever we're doing. Walking, this, that, moving here this year to Quebec, it's like, I don't know how many different outdoor activities I can do. But now I've got, my cross-country skis and my downhill skis and my snowboard and my snowshoes. And we've got a trolley for the kids also, to be able to take the kids. And just that, it has its own harness. So I never knew, the kind of harnessed skiing that I might try, right? All of these things become a natural way that we're doing Vyayama, that we're doing exercise. So this is also part of cleansing. Although I'm really looking forward to getting on the SUP board now. I'm looking forward to the spring moving towards the summer, and swimming and all of the qualities that come. So nature is a wonderful way. And that leads to the last two things which are prescribed in classical Shamana, which are sun exposure and wind exposure. So actually being exposed to these elements is part of cleansing. Think about it. When the air moves through us, what's it doing? It's like brushing off the old. It's clearing off the old. It inspires our hearts, does it not? The wind and the air element, Vayu, is connected to Anahata chakra, to the heart chakra. So there's something that happens in this. There's an inspiration. And the sun, what's the sun? The sun is the universal expression of Agni, right? Of the fire element. So what it's doing in that way then is it's helping to wake up the Agni in the entirety of our embodiment and also in our minds. That light, what does it do to our minds? Again, for mental health, we know this. You know, neuroscience and all that follows, quantum physics and all the things that are being shared now as though it's new information. Ayurveda is like, you know, the older sister or brother going, I told you, you know, like, I told you about that, really honestly. And I have so much reverence for these things coming in their own maps. It's so beautiful. But it's also wonderful to affirm that this ancient wisdom as well is just now being seen in new light, if we can say it in that way. So all the research we know about what happens with natural ingesting of vitamin D, the great rishis always knew this. Of course, you should spend gentle morning walks in the sun. It does something to your digestion. It does something to Agni in your cells. It does something to the mental and emotional Agni also. So all of this helps with your cleansing, in fact. Now, in Panchakarma programs, for example, when we do a more invasive or a more strong cleansing, you're actually not allowed to be subjected to the elements. So you use an umbrella or you go for very gentle walks. You don't do excessive exercise because it's so involved that we have to be really, really restrained in how much we do those things because the fasting is so strong and the treatments are so strong. But in Shamana, in this gentle cleansing, we can bring all of these things with gentleness, you know, a certain moderation. And what we're doing as well, really with all of these, is we're hitting a reset button. So what we're really doing in the application of these 6, so again, the fasting, the Agni Dipana, the Amapachana, the Vyayama, the exercise, the sunbathing and the air bathing is, or the wind bathing, is we're setting a reset button for what we want to come after the cleanse. We're coming afresh, we're coming anew, but we're also setting up new, what I would say, are sattvic habits, balanced habits. We're clearing the system of old impressions so we can come to the freshness and the newness of, oh, wow, I enjoy this exercise. Or, oh, wow, I'm enjoying that trail that I found that I'm going for walks in nature. Or I'm enjoying last night for a friend's birthday. It was the first time I've ever done this here. We went for salsa dancing. And it was a collective. It was very nice because it was a non-alcoholic collective in a local church. And there was like 150 people dancing and enjoying in sobriety, which was so wonderful to do, you know, together. Because I don't think I would find myself much more going to a salsa club with, you know, super loud music and that environment and a lot of alcohol and cigarettes. And that happened. That time happened, right? So even that, I could feel, oh, the gift of this. It's like a springtime energy. So we might join something new. Our exercise might involve us in something that's fresh, and springtime is blossoming energy. So it's a wonderful way to reset, create the reset button of how do I want to blossom? How do I want to fertilize this next phase of the year and this next phase of my life? So let's look in the remaining time we have in some nitty gritties of what we can do as far as the Shamana. But before I say that, something else we do with the Shamana is we also, or extra things we want to add to this cleansing, is it's also very helpful to have something we call Snehapana. And Snehapana means oiling, both internal oiling and external oiling. And many of you may have heard of this, or you may have experienced this if you went for Panchakarma treatment before, and you're like, what is that thing? Why do I have to drink all this ghee? What's with all the ghee? You know, so much about the ghee. Now, for those of you who are more plant-based, you can also use oil if you want, like sesame oil we use as well. And sometimes herbs are put into it as well or infused. But what we're doing really is we're oiling the tract. So external abhyanga, but internal oiling also helps the ama to slide out. It accumulates the ama from the system. It like attracts it, it sponges it, then it helps to move out. Classically in Panchakarma, you literally drink oil or drink ghee. Let me say it in that way. Okay, so clarified butter. You're drinking it. But in a very simple at-home cleanse, it just means also that we don't want any kind of fat-free system here. This is not what we're doing. During Shamana, it can be good, dependent upon our constitution, to add a bit of our doshic appropriate oil or ghee. So for example, for Kapha constitution, we might add a little less ghee, but it's still there. For Vata, we might add more because everything's so dry. When we have internal dryness, can we cleanse very well? Everything's stuck. Everything sticks to dryness. This is why these very depleting fasting regimes, like just fasting on water for a Vata constitution and giving no nourishment at the same time, can actually have the opposite effect. And I will see people will come with Ama buildup because what's happened, both depletion, but also the Ama wasn't able to move from the system because it got stuck in the friction. It got stuck in the dryness. So for each one of us, a little bit of ghee or oil, dependent upon each one of the constitutions, or a lot of, if it's more Vata. So Snehapana is also part of what we do in the Shamana. And we can just include that. So for example, those of you who have been more tending to do your cleanse with Khichdi diet, you'll see that appropriate oils, or Lisa, if she's doing the kind cleanse for you, will add appropriate oils or ghee dependent upon what your needs and your longings are as well with this. Even what vegetables are added, dependent upon both the season and the individual. The ratio of rice also to mung beans will also be changed, dependent upon the constitution. So for example, for those of us, again, who have more Vata, we might add, both Vata and Pitta, we might be adding more rice than mung beans. Especially for Vata, we might have more of the grain because what is the grain bringing? It's building, it's Brahmana. Right? So it tends to have more nourishing, it has more density, it can help in Vata depletion. But somehow we can say this is a gentle cleansing as well, because we're not eating the same old, right? But really, Khichdi, in its very nature, and this, I don't want to complicate this for you, but let's say it very simply. Khichdi as a dish is Brahmana, it's nourishing. But the reason it becomes a cleanse is because most of us don't eat something so balanced and plant-based and very simple. So it's actually that it becomes on some level a gentle langana, it becomes a gentle shamana cleansing because many of us eat much more, impurifying foods than that. But as a dish itself, it's actually building and restoring. It can be. So for a kapha individual, I don't always suggest a Khichdi cleanse, in fact, in the springtime. I might say, yes, we can do that, more heavy in the mung beans, the protein, the cleansing quality, the antacid quality also of the mung beans, but there could be other things as well. So Snehapana, to go back to that, we add some oils as well to help with the clearing of the ama, to clear it out of the system. And then we might even in our cleanse, and this is a more simple of the Panchakarmas, of the 5 actions of cleansing, we might even after our 2 weeks, decide to do what we call, or 1 week if we're doing this, 7 days, we might consider doing something like a very simple, what we call Viraichana. And Viraichana means a purgation. And many of you have heard before, for example, of different ways of doing purgation. Like on that master cleanse, I remember there was like taking 1.5 liters of salted water. Any of you done this before? So you drink this 1.5 liters of salted water and out you poop. This is a simple form of purgation. Okay, it helps to clear. But traditionally in Ayurveda, we use certain herbs. So we use things like Avipatti Churna or Gandharva Hastadi. So we would use these herbs, or another simple one is castor oil. So ingesting 4 to 5 tablespoons of castor oil in warm ginger tea in the morning when you wake up after a week or a couple of weeks of this cleansing, and you keep drinking warm water and you start to poop. To be very honest, you start to eliminate everything, all that ama and everything that has moved in the track from all this time of cleansing starts to be released from the system. Could be 5 times, could be 7 times, could be 12 times for some of us. If you have a longing to do this, but you really feel not so versed, even after me sharing this, that's when I would suggest having a consultation with myself or another Ayurvedic doctor or practitioner, sitting together with that. It doesn't require that we do this, but Viraichana is often a simpler of the 5 karmas. It may not sound so simple, but the simpler one, if we want to take the cleanse to its farthest point, if we can say it in that way, in a shamana way, in a gentle cleansing way. Now, let's just think together a little bit more about all of these steps as we come to the conclusion of our webinar. So this time for fasting, what are some of the things we can do to fast? So we can have a light, warm, plant-based diet, as simple as that. And what that involves is Nidana Parivarjana. We remove the causes of low Agni and high Ama. Low Agni and high Ama. So in our diet, what would that look like? We remove caffeine and sugar and processed foods and old leftovers and all of those sorts of things. We're having fresh food. We're having organic food if we can. We're having light and warm foods. And we're having foods that are almost entirely, if we can call them vegan or vegetarian, plus a little bit maybe of ghee or maybe good quality milk if we're using that. Now that gives you a wide range of options, actually, to be honest. So I often will suggest something like having soups, maybe for breakfast, having something like stewed fruits, or having a gentle oatmeal, or what we also call like a kanji. A kanji is like a rice kind of soup with a little bit of cumin. You're getting the point. Very light, easy to digest foods. And a mono diet can be very helpful. And that's why the Khichdi cleanse becomes also helpful, because you're only giving the digestive system one thing, right, to digest consistently. But it could be that you choose from that and you say, okay, so for mornings, I'm going to have, a quinoa kind of kanji. I'm going to have just quinoa porridge in the mornings. And I'm going to have a mung bean soup for lunch or for dinner. And I might have a small bowl of khichdi. And this is a very simple way. So it doesn't have to look like you just eat khichdi for 7 days or for 14 days, but it can be that as well. What it really is those qualities I mentioned before and applied for your dosha. So what are the spicings? What are the vegetables you might include in this? So vegetables, fruits, grains, all of those can be actually included. What we don't want to be having, especially in the spring season, is a bunch of cold, wet, damp smoothies. This is not a time for smoothie juicing, fasting kind of thing. It is for light, warm foods. And this is why soup diet, a little bit of porridge is the one that I often suggest. And there are a lot of recipes amidst that can be used. And we want to use good quality spicing in this. So like I said before, ginger, fennel, cumin, fenugreek, but again, applied dependent upon our dosha, but these are all wonderful ones. Turmeric. They're all very clearing for the channels as well. And what are other ways in our diet that we can introduce very simple Agni Deepanas and Amapachanas? One is ginger lemon honey tea. That's a very simple one. So grated ginger, boiled. We add some lemon to that. We wait for it to slightly cool. We never add honey to something that's boiling. We add a bit of honey because honey is actually clearing for the channels, especially for kapha dosha. It can be helpful actually as a sweetener that, we often think we can't have sweet. So just ginger and lemon or adding honey. Making a tea, for example, our CCF tea we have at RASA Ayurveda. Cumin, coriander, fennel. It's an excellent one. You drink that during your whole cleanse. This is quite tridoshic, but for vata, I often will ask them to add a little bit of fresh ginger, and for kapha, a little bit of dry ginger powder into that. Wonderful way to kindle the Agni and clear the Ama. Ajwain. Ajwain is similar to anise, if I can say it in that way. It's these tiny seeds. And ajwain tea is a great way, again, to kindle the Agni and to clear Ama out of the system. Drinking warm water. So throughout your cleanse, you just drink warm water. We have also at Rasa Ayurveda the Cleanse and Clarify tea. And this Cleanse and Clarify tea is an excellent one to take during your cleanse. Tridoshic in many ways. It will clear the channels and rekindle the Agni. So there's a lot of ways we can get kitchen medicine actually as our herbalism, if I can say it in that way. And at Rasa, I've also formulated these 4 different spice mixes, what we call traditionally masala churnas, spice mixes. And these are actually medicine, but you can put them in your food. So whatever you're making, your soup, or you're making your khichdi, or maybe you're making more a Mediterranean version of khichdi. I often say that, if you want to do rice and mung, you can. But if, for example, you want to do quinoa and you want to do white pinto beans or something, and you're more interested in having basil and that kind of flavor, this is fairly clearing and cleansing. If you take 2 weeks of a simple diet like this, you're going to notice that it's not invasive, but it's gently clearing. The benefits will be there for you. So it doesn't have to be Indian flavors. But of course, in our spice churnas, they're more Indian flavors, but we have them for every dosha. So we can either apply those to the food, use them in the food, or we can take them like a digestive tonic. This is an excellent way to do both Deepana and Pachana. You take a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of the spice mix, you put it in warm water, and you drink it before each meal during your cleanse. You'll notice a huge benefit that will start to happen in the digestive tract. And what's one of the simplest herbs we can take daily to help with our clearing and cleansing? Triphala. So Triphala is an excellent one. We could take it even during our cleanse morning and night. And what we call a Triphala kashaya, a Triphala decoction, can be wonderful. Hot water, a tablespoon of Triphala. We pour it over the Triphala, so the hot water, about 3 cups of hot water. And then taking half of that in the morning and half of that in the evening can be a wonderful way to clear the system. This is a higher dosage of Triphala. Some of us might just do 1 teaspoon. Especially if we have more vata and there's not that much ama in the system, just a little bit of Triphala to clear the channels. But if we're feeling like that sludginess is there, go for it. Use your Triphala in a stronger tea during this time. It's not harmful. It's not a habituated laxative. It's a wonderful way to clear the channels. Another one at RASA Ayurveda that I suggest as far as our herbal formulas is our Slim and Trim. It's not just about losing weight, but especially for kapha, weight holding or sludgy holding, ama holding, and for pitta inflammation. The Slim and Trim can be a wonderful springtime potion to take during our cleanse. So that's a wonderful way to trim out the ama, if I can say it in that way, to reduce the ama that's in the system. But now we talked about diet. Now what about all the other aharas, right? What about all the other inputs? So fasting and clearing with the other inputs, one of the best ways we can do this during our cleanse is really rooting into our dinacharya and our ratricharya, our daily routines and our nightly routines. So getting reset with those. So scraping our tongue, using our oil pulling, dry brushing the body, doing some abhyanga. You all know these, and if you don't, come to the next time we have a dinacharya workshop, or also check out, we have great dinacharya articles and videos on the website. They're right there for you. Great resources for you to go through and see each product and to see why we sell them, why we share them. I mean, the only reason all of these things are sold is for this benefit of Ayurveda. So you go through the dinacharya document that's there and you'll see all the different rituals. This is a wonderful way to both hit the reset button, but what dinacharya does is it clears all 5 senses. It's ama pachana for the 5 senses. It's cleansing the ama out. How we wash the eyes and clear the eyes. We use kajal in the eyes, for example. How we clear the ears as well, right? How we clear the nose with neti and with nasya. So dinacharya and ratricharya is our evening routine. So always during a cleanse, I suggest that we really get conscious about what our evening routine is going to be. So maybe at night, making sure that we do digital detox. Take some time away from digitization. But in general for ahara, during our fasting, during our cleansing, during our shamana, it's a question for all of us. Am I leading to ama in my system because of all the social media input, all the work input, all the stress input? So part of our cleanse also has to consider our lifestyle, what we call our vihara. How can I shift my lifestyle? Like I said before, spending more time in nature, less time in the ama producing kind of areas of my life. You see, the cleanse is not just about our diet. If you take these dietary recommendations, but you stay in the same stressful social media input kind of situations, you've done really 1/4 of the work. And what they will also do is they'll promote the old consciousness of the things you want to eat and the things you want to be bogged down by. Let me be honest about that. The old habituated ways. So the cleansing is more full throttle in. What will I really give my time to shamana around? What do I want to cleanse and fast out in all these ways? So dinacharya and ratricharya also helps with that. Really having a settled routine for our cleanse time is very, very important. What other kinds of things can we do? So after we've done this time of cleanse, another thing that is very important is that we give a time of what we call Rasayana. And that's the last thing that I'll share. And Rasayana means rejuvenation. So we don't just leave ourselves hanging, right? How horrible does that feel, right? If we do all this cleansing and then what now? We've created the open field and now we want to give rejuvenation. So what does rejuvenation look like? Well, the rejuvenation can look like stabilizing with the same kind of diet, but maybe we're adding slowly a couple other things. So if we've only been having soup and khichdi, for example. Now we say, okay, I can have a more, well versed and full vegetarian diet now. But we still stay fairly vegetarian during our Rasayana period. And often what I'll say is whatever period we choose for the cleanse, at least the Rasayana period should be the same amount of time. So if you do 2 weeks of cleansing, do 2 weeks of Rasayana. The other thing that's quite important in the Rasayana period is that we also take some Rasayana herbs. So if we've done cleansing, now it's good to rebuild. And how can we rebuild? One of the simplest ways is to take, for example, an Amalaki or an Amla tea, just like I talked about doing the Triphala tea. And we have that on the website. Lisa's put a beautiful blog about this as well. We can also do an Amalaki tea. So for example, 1 teaspoon of Amalaki in a cup of warm water, and we drink that twice daily before lunch and before dinner. And this can be a wonderful way to bring Rasayana. Amalaki is high vitamin C, and it's an amazing plant, one of the most dense and rebuilding plants and herbs. Very simple one, though this is a single herb. See, in Ayurveda, we have a lot of formulations that we could apply, but this is a simple one. And we can get it, you can get it here at RASA Organic. We sell Amalaki. So it's an easy one that we can use. What are other ways? Our diet becomes more, as I said before, more expressed in its fullness now. But if we're going to reintroduce, notice I'm saying if, we're going to introduce caffeine, or we're going to reintroduce alcohol, or we're going to reintroduce those things, it definitely doesn't happen in those 2 weeks. Or we're going to introduce meat, and even making selections around that. The Rasayana period is also about our consciousness. How do we restore our health consciousness? The consciousness that we are not the disease we might have lived by before, but we are really this that we're seeing afresh now. What do I want for this next phase of my life? So the Rasayana is not just about rebuilding the body, but it's also about rebuilding the steps towards the way in which I want to be embodied and live in this world. So we get very clear about, if I have been drinking, okay, is there a place of moderation? And recently we put up a blog also about alcohol, even its consideration in Ayurveda. Ayurveda doesn't say no to anything. It just says in the right way and in the right time, in fact. Okay, you're all like, does that mean 3 glasses of wine 3 nights a week? No, it doesn't. It never really means that. But, still looking at this and asking, because when the summer season comes, what happens? It's patio season. It's season where a lot of us end up, So that's why it's wonderful to have these stabilized 2 times when we fast or when we give the time to cleansing, because it really does hit the Rasayana button. How do I want to live a rejuvenated, swasta-filled life, a health-filled life? What does that look like now for this next season? How much social media do I want to engage in? How do I want to make changes in my workplace? How do I want to make changes in my family dynamic? You see, this is the beauty of Shamana. When it clears the space, we can see things afresh. We see new possibilities, prana shakti, the resource, the feminine resource of prana. She becomes much more available, and she can say to us, no, look, this is a new way you could engage in that. Or this is a new way you could engage in this. So a lot of people will say, I had aha moments, Tiffany, during my cleanse. Absolutely. So journal, write these down. And during the Rasayana, it's like, what am I rebuilding towards? What did I love about my exercise? What did I love about the nature I was connecting with? What are the rebuilding places of healthfulness I can bring into my life? So this is a beautiful part of Rasayana. And at Rasa, one of the things I definitely suggest with Rasayana is taking, for example, our Adapt-A-Life potion also. That's a wonderful Rasayana for all of us, filled with wonderful Rasayana herbs, wonderful rejuvenative herbs. And so this can be a wonderful way after we've done the cleansing that we can then add to this. And then we continue with our Abhyanga. You see, during the cleansing period, we might do more dry brushing, for example. We might do more clearing of the nasal passageway with neti, maybe neti and nasya, but now we're rebuilding the body even more. So we're really looking. And again, it's dependent on each one of us. If you've got a good, healthy kapha, you're still not going to be doing Abhyanga every single day. You might do Abhyanga once in a week, for example. Right? So each one of us has to look for us what that looks like. Another drink that actually I would highlight even during the cleanse that we have is our Ayurvedic coffee, because it's a great one if you're drinking coffee to deal with the withdrawals of the coffee because it cleanses the liver and it also gives you the ritual feeling of drinking coffee. So you're like, okay, thank God, right? So taking that one. And even some people will say to me, the alcohol thing is a hard thing, Tiffany. And I'll say, okay, then do pomegranate juice. Pomegranate juice, tart cherry juice, put it in a wine glass, drink it during your cleanse. Honestly, the consciousness can be tricked in these ways. Of course it doesn't taste like wine, but you add a little bit of that. And this is excellent for clearing the liver, actually. So there are ways that we can sattvic implantations that we can bring actually to change things in those ways. There are little things. Even in Ayurveda, you see, Ayurveda is so forgiving and giving. There were beautiful tricks that the great Vaidyas would offer. For smoking, we even had herbal cigarettes. So cigarettes that were Dhumapana. Dhumapana means natural smoking, just like you have natural smoking of smudging of areas. And this is something I didn't mention, but part of our fasting and our cleansing can also be the smudging and clearing and purging of our space, right? Spring cleaning. And you'll notice that that will naturally arise. I clean here, and now I want the space around me to be clean as well, right? But Dhumapana, even herbal cigarettes or herbal smoking, if smoking really is an issue for you, then cutting back with the fasting, but even using herbal cigarettes can be helpful. Tobacco-free cigarettes. There are even sources of these out there. So Ayurveda had ways to offer all of this in Shamana so that we could really restore our balance, so we could really restore our place to come back to our naturalness of swasta. So I've given you a lot of things to consider. One thing I didn't say is part of our Vyayama in Ayurveda is obviously yoga. So part of exercise in Ayurveda is considered yoga, but it doesn't have to be yoga. So our yoga can be, again, both Langana, it can be cleansing, and it can also be Brahmana, it can be nourishing. So during your cleanse, you can do yoga like Surya Namaskar and sun salutations and things that help to get the whole body moving and clearing. But you can even think during your Rasayana period, your rejuvenative period afterwards, that you do literally some more restorative yoga. You combine things, right? So even the exercise can take on, these parts of the cleanse. And again, for each one of us, some of us might be like, nope, Tiffany, even during the Rasayana period, rejuvenation for me looks like 10 minutes of HIIT a day. I need to be moving this body, right? This is rejuvenating, especially for those of us who have more kapha. So you see, again, each one of us looking at this in a wider scale, in a wider breadth, to really see how it will apply for you. And it can be, rather than an accumulation of a bunch of things to do, let it be a joy. A joyful exploration. This is where the vichara arises, the vichara yoga of who am I? What is this? What's this thing I take for granted? This existence, this system, this mind, this heart beingness. Who am I truly? And a cleanse is a beautiful time to come into consideration around that, because you'll see you'll be very different after 2 weeks than you were 2 weeks before. It really, life in itself is a shamana. It's often a very, palliative cleansing for many of us. But when we bring this intentionality around the cleansing, we really can feel like we're a new person, we're a new being after these couple of weeks, and we can move with that as well. So even if it's for 3 days, I hope that this is of help. Even if it's for 1 day, I hope this is of help for all of us as well, when we think about Ayurvedic cleansing in general, but also during this spring season as well, during this kapha season. So I want to see if there is anything that was really unclear for anyone. And otherwise, I'm aware that we're over time, so we'll pause there. Is there anything that's left over for anyone? Okay, then I'm going to welcome you to just sit for a moment as I chant and conclude us out. Okay, let's just sit up nice and tall. You can bring the hands to heart, and I'll chant a beautiful prayer that just really connects us to a blessing of peace for all beings. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Nirahamaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashantu Ma Kaschit Dukkha Bhave. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May this wisdom of Ayurveda truly enlighten our hearts, our beings, our lives. May we live more wakeful in the truth of our own health at this time and all times, and may it benefit so many beings on this planet at this time. Namaste. Thank you, dear ones. It's a joy to be with all of you and to have this time as well together. I'll see each other again soon, and this recording will also be available